Right, hello, greetings. Shalom. It's Dr. Thomas Daffin here, and it's Sunday. It's my fasting day. It's just gone, well, it's still kind of the spring equinox. Today is Sunday, March the 22nd. Spring equinox should be a beautiful time for everyone. It's the beginning of spring in the Northern Hemisphere. You know, we're going through a serious planetary crisis with coronavirus, which I'm going to be addressing shortly. So probably people are having less celebrations, less spring-like activities, obviously, and it's much more a sort of going within time for all of us. And many people in the world are now on what we're calling lockdown, meaning you're at home, you know, alone or with your close family or friends. So it's a really scary time for many people. But on the other hand, that opportunity to go on the inner journey is not necessarily a bad thing. And you know, it has its upside. For me, it doesn't actually make much difference because I spend quite a lot of time in solitary retreat, studying, writing. Because I teach at a distance, it doesn't, you know, I don't have to cancel classes. I mean, there are some coming events that are problematic, courses, etc. They probably won't be happening unless we solve it very quickly. So anyway, to all my friends and you know, loved ones and just random people that find my talks, I wish you well, good health, and I hope this doesn't affect you. So what do I want to talk about today? Today is also, in the Christian calendar, it's the fourth Sunday in Lent, and I'll be reading out at the end a text appropriate to that as we're coming up to Easter. Okay, so what I thought I'd do this time is I've just published my Institute newsletter. Most of you know I run this Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy, which was set up at the University of London back in 1991. Feels like a lifetime ago, but I can virtually remember every single day since then of combining peace scholarship with peace activism. The Institute was set up as a think tank for peace, you know, thinking, peace studies and education. When I was at the Institute of Education, I was based there as a research development officer in Bloomsbury. It's the biggest educational institute in the English-speaking world. There's nothing like it in, even in America. I mean, Teachers College and Columbia University is sort of the nearest equivalent. And it was really interesting to work there for about, 5 years in total as a research development officer. And I met lots of experts in education for peace. Now a lot of them are dead, sadly. That's what happens to human life. We're mortal, but they, you know, inspired me to create this institute, and the hope was we would get a proper base in Bloomsbury as an autonomous institute and have a base there. The Institute of Education is now part of University College, which was an amalgamation of two institutes. I still would like an independent Institute of Peace Studies as part of the Federal University of London, but that would require many millions, unfortunately. If any very wealthy sheikhs are watching want to endow a college at the University of London in peace and peace studies, then, you know, send me a check. I think 10 million would do it. Meanwhile, we just carry on from here in France, and the Institute, however, carries on a sort of international network, and a couple of times a year I produce a newsletter, and I also produce a journal, which is the only academic journal devoted to the study of love in the world. There isn't another. It was launched at the Institute of Education. In '93 was the first issue. I was also running meetings in the House of Lords on ethics and peace. And I just got back from a trip around the States in 1992. I travelled on Amtrak trains going to virtually every state, interviewing professors of education and peace studies and conflict resolution. Berkeley, Los Angeles, Chicago, etc. I went all the way down to St. Louis. Started at Harvard and interviewed people there, and I have all these things on tape still, and also in New York at Columbia University. So, yeah, I met I think the most important intellectuals active in the US in those at that time, '92, in peace and conflict resolution. Obviously, the field's matured, it's developed. Some of those I met have died, like Morton Deutsch, but they've all left, a legacy. Elise Boulding is another who's died, sadly. Kenneth Boulding, her husband. But there are still people working away. I visited Washington. I didn't go to George Mason, which is a shame because it's probably the most important research centre in the States in my field. And it has now a centre for religion and conflict resolution, which is very interesting. I think it's run by a man called Mark Gopin, who's a rabbi and a learned professor. Well, I don't know where he was in '92. I don't think he'd probably even done his rabbi studies. Anyway, so this newsletter, I thought I would run through it orally. I mean, I've sent it to Institute colleagues, members scattered around the world. You can read it, but I'm going to do a general summary of it, and it's useful then to talk through the points that I raise in it, because that's what I want to share today. So, without further ado, it's obviously, a lot of work gone into it, and I can only just summarise in brief the contents. If you want to see the full text, just email me or put a note at the end of this talk. The first point is about coronavirus, because this is affecting the entire world in a negative way. I mean, terribly. 400 people died in Spain yesterday, I believe. I read on the internet. And here in France, we're all on lockdown. I'm not allowed to go out without a written, permission slip, where I'm going. Which I think is right. We should be. But and it's fine for me living in a house in the countryside, surrounded by fields. I can actually still go for walks in. What if I'm, living in a little flat, cooped up with 5 children? I mean, it must be a nightmare for people. So my heart goes out to everyone suffering this tragedy, particularly in Europe, in northern Italy, where so many people are dying. It's just, I can't quite fathom it. I mean, I've read reports that it's just by chance, and that it just happens that a few people have gone to China and came back with it and then walked around and spread it, which shows how terribly contagious and dangerous this is. And that's why, one should self-isolate or go on lockdown. Touch wood, I don't think I have it yet. I'm still here, but, who knows? It's a matter of time, isn't it? I pray that we can get scientists to get on top of this and find out how to cure it. My research has been going more as a, philosopher and academic interest in peace studies. I've approached it from a different angle, more at the causation level and the implications for the planet. And I've been studying, this matter since it began, really. Doing a lot of research, and so I put a lot of this research into the newsletter, and those that are interested. But basically, I'm exploring. There are 6 hypotheses really for what's caused this terrible outbreak, and there's a 7th position, which is the I'll come to that at the end. The 6 hypotheses I'm going to very briefly summarise. I think I might have begun this last week, but I've sharpened my thinking on this and come across a lot more data. So hypothesis 1 is the traditional scientific Darwinian theory. This is a random mutation causing this virus to escape from bats and pangolins in China. Whether it was a one-off, we don't know, or whether it was happened several times. Where it actually then transferred to humans is again unknown. It was thought in the meat market in Wuhan, but looks like it probably wasn't. So somewhere, near and around Wuhan. Did it happen just once? This is what, medical doctors, researchers called case 0. Who was the case 0, the very first person to come down with this? Somewhere in or near Wuhan. That should be on file, that should be discoverable. We need to find that out. We need to discover who case 0 is. I've been reading articles in the New Scientist, which is covering this quite well, and this is its position. It's a traditional scientific explanation for the outbreak. Now, anyway, I explain in the newsletter why there are, I try and give a fair innings to that theory. There are some issues and questions to ask. My main question is, as a philosopher of science, is, well, why has this never happened before? Here we are in 2020. Has anything like this ever happened before? This dangerous and this virulent and this... I mean, apparently it's 1,000 times more virulent than the SARS illness even, with which it's compared. So there are question marks, and I go into them. But basically, this theory is there is no reason or meaning for this. It's a random mutation, it's a random event, it's just a tragic set of circumstances. The meaning we could derive from it, possibly, is that it's because we've been going into parts of remote areas where we don't really belong. And I did read with some concern that one of the researchers was going into bat caves and poking around and trying to find bats with this sort of illness in. And she's been making a habit of doing this for some years. I mean, maybe she or some of her colleagues, went in and sort of found the virus and thought, oh good, we've got a new virus, and then somehow it escaped. Discuss, that's this theory. I mean, that fits in with this theory. Somehow it escaped. Now, how did it, it either escaped in the wild or it was brought to a lab and then escaped from there. Anyway, the second hypothesis is a sort of variant of this, which is it naturally evolved. This is 1b, by the way, we're still on 1. It just evolved, as in conventional Darwinian science says viruses evolve. And then however, this sort of argument is a kind of green perspective, which sees some kind of purpose or consciousness at work in nature. Nature isn't just random mutations, which is 1a. There's a kind of almost a redemptive suffering going on. And loads of people that I see posts on social media or have spoken to on the phone, they say, well, this is nature's way of culling humanity because we are arrogant, there's too many of us, we need to be taken down a peg or two, and the bat virus has hit back on behalf of Gaia. And this is a sort of deep green perspective that argues that all life is, one interlocking being, Gaia, but doesn't, believe in a theistic worldview. It's just that's nature, and so this is nature's way of ensuring the balance is kept. Human beings are not, it's a good lesson for us, is the argument. But otherwise, the science would remain the same. I have, difficulties with that hypothesis because it makes out nature to be somewhat callous and somewhat cruel, in that if, I don't know, let's say 100,000 people are going to die, 20, 30,000 have already died, I believe, some in extreme pain and discomfort. Well, is that how nature operates? That's, to me, somewhat problematic philosophically and ethically. I don't really want to believe that nature... I mean, I suppose I'm a sort of deep green in my thinking, but I find that challenging to make the leap to this is how nature does the culling process. Discuss. I have some issues with that, which I raise in the journal. I won't go into it all now. Item number 2, hypothesis number 2, is that no, this was not just a random, sequence. This actually was engineered in a bioweapons lab. And I've read loads and loads of information and data and so on. arguing that point, which I've summarised in my newsletter. Now, I suspend judgment, by the way. My job as a philosopher is simply to look at the arguments, all 6 of them. I'm suspending judgment. I'm not making now, as yet, a decision. I'm still doing the research. And if anyone listening to this has come across really, really important research, robust, scientific, hopefully, referenced and all the rest of it, then please send it to me in whatever format. I will look at it. One of the problems is because we're living in this post-truth age where politicians no longer tell the truth, so ordinary people have sort of giving up the habit. I just had a conversation today with someone in France who was brought up in England when I was, and we were taught to tell the truth as like de rigueur in school and in families, and we expected in the 60s and 70s politicians to tell the truth, and if they were caught lying, they resigned. I still think we should be in that world, and just to remind them, I still think that should be made a legal duty of politicians to tell the truth, and if they're caught lying, they resign. So let's just say, let's just say this actually was made in a bioweapons lab in Portland Down, for example. It's possible. It must have been made in some bioweapons lab. And I discuss, there are several there's one in Canada, one in the USA, Fort Detrick, there's others in China and Russia and all the rest. Somebody has the list of them all, and I think it's held in Geneva at the Bioweapons Convention, Biological Warfare Convention offices in the Palais des Nations in Geneva. You see, research on bioweapons like this is illegal. And if it's leaked from a bioweapons lab and been deliberately designed, then that's broken that law. And the question arises what sanctions there are under the Bioweapons Convention, which is a treaty that the world's powers have signed, including China, Russia, America, Europe, etc., Britain, Israel. I think even Israel signed this one. Well, then the question is, well, where's the teeth? Where's the sanctions? So if it turns out, yes, it was made in a bioweapons lab in Portland Down, well, so what? Boris Johnson just said, oh, yeah, okay, well, hey, we thought it was a good idea. We're terribly sorry. There's been a bit of blowback, but, we're working on a virus. However, what if he gets up in the Commons and he's asked by Jeremy Corbyn, did our boys in Portland Down make this? And he says no. But later it turns out, because there's a new government and they look in the files, that actually, no, we did make it, Well, then he lied, didn't he? So, in my world, in my legislation, under my proposal, he would be sacked as a Prime Minister, sacked as an MP immediately, the minute the lie is revealed. And I think that should apply at all levels of politics, right down to local council level, and also in the police and other sort of public officials. I mean, I as a teacher, sort of public servant, effectively, we weren't allowed to lie in our jobs, I mean, I can't fiddle the exam figures, I can't cheat in a A-level result, etc. I would be sacked. Well, it should be the same for politicians. They are the only body in the world, as far as I can see, that have no licensing system, no sanctioning, no guidance system of ethics as to which they can't step over the line. Doctors are penalised if doctors even accidentally kill a patient. They are hugely, put over the coals, and teachers the same. If I took a minibus trip out and crashed the car and 2 of my students died, I'd be probably sacked as a teacher, and it's a grave offence. I would be struck off the roll of teachers. Well, politicians should have the same thing, a role, a licensing system, which they have to keep up to date. I think they should do ethics exams, and they should swear an oath to tell the truth. It should be mandatory for the license to be a politician. Like, you license everybody, vets, even to be a dishwasher almost, you have to get a license that you know how to wash dishes, So politicians who have the power to make the laws that govern every other profession, well, it's unthinkable that they should get away scot-free with having no licensing system. So that's I discussed that in the newsletter, and you're welcome to read it. So if it was made important down, at the moment, Boris Johnson can just say, no, it wasn't. And there's no way of holding him to account. And the equivalent in America, if it was made in Fort Detrick and somebody asks, Trump, was it made in Fort Detrick? And he'll just say no. Well, there's no way of calling him to account, of demanding he tell the truth. And the same in every other country in the world, Israel, wherever. So we will never know, the people of this planet will never know what caused this until we have a duty to tell the truth on all our political leaders in Russia and Saudi Arabia and everywhere by law. And that's a separate campaign I've launched. It's in the newsletter, and there's a website. It's called The Duty of Parliamentary Veracity. It's the name of the bill, which I've drafted for UK law, but it's valid and could be tweaked to apply it to everywhere. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, whatever. India. And, I think it's long, long overdue. Okay, so that's the the second thing, as I say, is that it was deliberately manufactured in some kind of bioweapons lab, Portland down, wherever. But it accidentally leaked. So nobody deliberately said, I tell you what, we'll give mass disease to humanity and create coronavirus pandemic. No, it was some idiot was transferring something and spilled a file, or it was someone, there's some claims that it was in China in their bioweapons lab, which also looks at virology in Wuhan, and they were testing this virus. They got it off the bats, this bat woman was there, etc., etc. Somehow it got into some animals which were then sold onto the meat market. That's the leak theory. And there is some evidence for that, and I discuss it in the newsletter. I suspend judgment if it's true or not, but it's a scary thought. But, in other words, it's a cock-up theory of the cause of it. People are stupid, people are ignorant, and it's possible, somebody made a mistake. The third theory, which is option 3, is even scarier. And this is that it was made artificially. It was made in a bioweapons lab at a location unknown, but it was leaked deliberately. This was a deployment, we would use the term. Totally against international law, against national law, I would imagine. But it was leaked at the instruction of some political elite system of governance and policy, military policy, as a deliberate strategy. This was somebody's idea of a good military move. And again, we don't know who. A lot of evidence, a lot of people point to the fact that it might well have been the USA, because the USA looks like the most likely to benefit. Obviously not now. There's been blowback and huge casualties are expected in the US. It's going to take down a lot of people in the US, as it's doing in Western Europe, and has done in China and so on. So, but, is it possible that somebody in the US system, somewhere in the kind of world of smoking mirrors that Washington, the Pentagon is surrounded by, someone in the Pentagon thought, let's have a bioweapons deployment against China and Iran? The theory is, and it's been stated by a chap who worked in psychological warfare. He was a colonel in a psychological warfare division, which apparently the US has. He has come out, he's retired now, so he's speaking in public, and he says, no, I know what this is. This is a deployment of a biological warfare weapon as part of a general PSYOPs operation by American military in order to silence 3 countries, China and Iran, and indirectly Russia. Although it wasn't deployed against Russia, it was deployed probably separately against China and Iran, with the intention of preventing those 3 countries making more of an alliance, because they are beginning to rival the US and its allies as a sort of power bloc. China and Russia combined are pretty powerful. Iran is not a pushover. So if those 3 countries come together and form like an axis of power, then that's a threat to the the petrodollar world of America and its allies, especially the UK and Israel in terms of Middle Eastern politics, and also Saudi Arabia, which has identified like 100% with that US world order. So the argument is this was a deployment against it, and this is being stated by an American PSYOPs major. This is not my theory, you know. You can find this now. Right. 28 dead in Bogota in Colombia, a prison riot caused by coronavirus. Just you know, yes, I mean, I've been wondering what's going to be happening in prisons, because prisons are like a breeding ground, and if it gets in there, then I think it's going to spread like wildfire. And I was thinking the same of hospitals, and mental hospitals in particular, where people are kind of confined. What if some nurse inadvertently brings it in from the outside? Mental hospitals are not geared up for, you know, septic, hand washing type stuff. Yeah, if it gets into these places, it's going to cause real trouble. So looks like the prisoners of Bogota are having a bit of a panic about that too. So anyway, that's just a scary thought. So, I mean, I, as a UK citizen, I want to just jump up and down and shout, "Oi, this is utterly outrageous." That even to think that my country, the UK, would have been complicit in an American conspiracy to attack, you know, China and Iran. Perhaps Israel, Saudi Arabia, but what the American guy is saying, this general, Scott he's called, he's a major, not a general, is that, yeah, it is a PSYOPs operation using coronavirus, but other things, internet warfare and so on. Yeah, I'm not happy with that, and I want questions asked in Parliament by opposition MPs. I mean, I'm in touch with some of them. I'm going to try and get questions asked. Now, you see, the standard reply in Parliament is, so opposition MP says, was this deployed by Western, you know, forces as a bioweapon? Well, the immediate reply is, sorry, we can't comment on matters of national security. That is what the standard answer is in Parliament. And if you recall, during the horrible Brexit meltdown, that was what the Attorney General, that's what the Theresa May, that's what everyone always says in answer to any question of significance. Can't comment, because it's either subject to judicial review, which is what the Attorney General kept saying, or it's subject to national security. Well, I think a new rule needs to be brought in that you can't not answer questions on those two grounds anymore in Parliament. Otherwise, what's the point of having Parliament, right? I think Parliament takes precedence over every other debating forum in the land. It is the apex of the power system in the UK. What's happened is that apex has now been shifted up to the Privy Council. So in the Privy Council, discussions go on about issues of national security. And before the bombing of the Syrian alleged scientific laboratories that were manufacturing gas and so on under Theresa May, which was done preemptively and without discussion in Parliament. After, that was done on the Saturday. On the Monday, it was presented in Parliament. Well, we discussed it in the Privy Council and they okayed it, and it was on the basis of intelligence, but we can only share that with the Privy Council, and sorry, Parliament, you can't see it. That's what Theresa May got up and said. Now that means the locus of power is now shifted in our country up to the Privy Council, which is operating outside of the reach of freedom of information legislation. We have no rights to see or hear what goes on in those chambers. The information could have been fake. I suspect it was, because the targets that were hit were completely non-military. We smashed an institute in near Damascus that was doing bona fide scientific research on ecology and alternative energy and all kinds of stuff. Millions of pounds and years of research went up in smoke because of Theresa May's husband's missiles, for which he got a killing, his company. And I was utterly scandalised. I wrote to the Speaker of Parliament and I said, did he realise that, you know, parliamentary sovereignty is now gone to the Privy Council? And I still think he's now a professor at my old University of London. I still think that that is a question he should be pursuing in his academic research. I still think that the speaker did such a good job that his future political career should possibly be to come back as part of some kind of national government of unity once we get these Tories out of their majority. So that's option 3. It was deliberately deployed, and probably by a consortium of governments, USA, UK, Israel, Saudi Arabia, for starters. There might be a few stragglers. Now, who knew? Who authorised this? Well, only small elites within those countries, like the military security apparatus at the highest level, would have said, yeah, this is necessary now because, look at those Chinese and Iranians, they're too uppity. Anyway, discuss, questions. Questions on the floor of the House, please. Questions in Congress, questions in Knesset, and since those institutions might not be meeting in person, then questions in other media. However, there's the fourth hypothesis, is that, no, actually, nobody would be that stupid. Even those governments, which are a bit bellicose and warlike, as we know, wouldn't have done this, because their research would have told them it would blow back. They would know that sooner or later people like me, peace researchers, would find out, heads would roll, public opinion would turn against them, and there'd be a popular revolt, like yellow vests all over the world outside Washington, parked on the lawn, demanding that whoever knew resign immediately and face trial. This option, number 4, is that even those elites that are running us, like Johnson and Trump, are not that evil and stupid. So no, they wouldn't have authorised it. Even Netanyahu, who many people don't like and suspect all kinds of stuff, even he wouldn't have authorised this. No. Anyway, that's the theory. So who did? Well, this theory says it's an international criminal gang. It's a conspiracy. This is a higher-up terrorist criminal gang that did this. A sort of dark ops. I don't know who it is or who would be behind it, but I imagine they're extremely wealthy. I think this is billionaire, trillionaire level. Some of the names. Why would they have done this? Well, these are a criminal elite associated with Western countries like USA, UK, Israel, etc., who are afraid for the future of capitalism, the stability of the world, and their dominance of the world. So this is the Anglo-UK hegemony, written about by many scholars. It goes back to like World War One. It won that war, and it then won the next war, and it sort of engineered world order so that it would kind of be in charge, and now its days are numbered, and it can see the writing on the wall. So it thought, well, I tell you what we'll do. And this isn't government level. This is secret cabals that make or break governments. This is higher up than that. I tell you what, we need to get our boys organising a bioweapons deployment in Wuhan, and everyone will think it's China, so that's good, and then it'll bring down China's economy, and that'll prove to the world that we are the good guys after all. Blah, blah, blah. There's some arrogance of that elite. So then this becomes a criminal conspiracy which should be in the hands of Interpol.